Hello and welcome back to another Silmarillion film podcast. The podcast, this week at least, that's all about unfriendship.
That's right. That's right. Been looking forward to the unfriendship discussion for a long time. That's just always been a favorite word. You know, I was almost disappointed when Facebook was invented and like unfriending or defriending became a thing, right? Because it kind of like made almost like impinged on the specialness of that phrase. But that there's been always been something so evocative to me of that one sentence in the Silmarillion and encountering the unfriendship of the Green Elves.
Yes. The unfriendship on Facebook is really has trivialized.
It has. It's trivialized it. That was the loss that I felt when that happened. But that's okay. It's still cool.
Because here we are.
Absolutely.
So I'm the co-host Dave Kale, and joining me as always is a man who I feel like his entire career has been characterized by unfriendship. You think about it, but you're all about Corey.
Absolutely.
And we're joined tonight by someone who's not an unfriend, Marie Prosser.
That's right.
One of our amazing writers and creatives, and on this head creatives on this project.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. So yeah,
but joining us in a spirit of unfriendship.
That's right, because we're all about unfriendship today.
Yes.
Yes, because today we're talking about episode number 5 of season 5. So we have we've had the script outline for episode 5. So we're going to be going through that, and we're having we've talked about, of course, in the previous. Not the previous session of the podcast, but the previous episode of the season, episode 4. We talked about Haleth and the Halladine and their tribulations leading up to, of course, the fight, and in which the father and brother of Haleth died in the beginning of her leadership of her people. And we're, of course, going to be continuing the story of Haleth as they're going to go on through Nandangortheb. And, of course, we're going to become introduced to the other houses of the men as they enter and cross over the mountains. The final latecomers. Now, the kind of bigger themes, of course, the big theme is unfriendship, right? And we're finally going to be looking at sort of big picture. All of the encounters between elves and men have been kind of local encounters in a sense, right? We had Finrod meeting with Beor and the people of Beor, and his pretty much unilateral decision to bring them back with him to Nargothrond. So they've been kind of sheltered by him. We had the people of Haleth independently, and then their encounter with Caranthir at the end of that episode. Now we're really going to begin digging into, for the first time, what does the arrival of men mean across Beleriand? Like, what is the sort of the larger view? And especially, of course, we're focusing in on Doriath there in the center, with lots of fun setup of Thingol for interactions with humans to come. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's our topic for tonight. Looking through that outline, a couple quick announcements before we dig in. Just a reminder: Mythmoot 8, The World Ahead, is going to be happening June 24th to 27th, and you can go signumuniversity.org/Mythmoot and find more information on that. You can learn about our speakers, and you can see our call for papers, which we strongly recommend folks to submit proposals for that. And you can register for one of our 2 online, for one of our 2 digital enrollment forms right now. Still just digital so far. Our decision time is coming when we have to decide for sure whether or not we're going to try to do something hybrid or whether we're going to do it all digital. We'll see what happens. But you can submit there anyway. In any case, Stephen says, tip, it helps if you submit your paper proposal to the correct email address. It is true. You are more likely to get accepted. That is a cunning pro tip. You are more likely to get accepted if you actually send it to the submission email address. That's very true.
But you're not guaranteed not to get accepted.
That's right. Whatever random person you emailed might in fact accept your proposal. that could happen. That could happen. Yeah. The other thing to remind folks of is that our Signum Clubs program is happening, our extracurricular programs for kids grades 3 through 12, book club, writing club, language clubs. And I encourage you to go to signumuniversity.org/academy to find more information about our clubs. We're forming sections for our clubs now, which is really fun. So we're having a section of our book club, a section of our creative writing club, and a section of our Old English translation club starting up here in April. And we're ready to start more. So encourage folks to look into that. And, of course, the next Film script discussion. They're already up on episode 10 already, which is good. So this is that's the leading edge, right? As you guys, Marie, talk your way through you're kind of brainstorming and working through the ideas there of the scripts, right? And then when you and then of course there's time after that to formulate the formal outline and possibly draft a script if there's time for that. Thereafter, before we get to it and discuss it. So that's pretty cool. So that's going to be happening on Sunday, March 21st. So that's not this Sunday, but next Sunday, March 21st at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you can post in the script discussion forum there if you would like to attend. And of course you can post in the script discussion forum if you have ideas or suggestion that you would like them to take into account when they do the script discussion there on Sunday the 21st. So let's get into episode 5. So Swift Judgment is the working title of the episode. Yeah. I think I like that title. It's a little hard not to use the word unfriendship, though. Like I'm just saying. It'd
be good if we could work it in there.
Yeah.
A running theme throughout the episode is Gandalf's quote about do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment.
Right.
So that is what's going on with that title. But I'm not really all that good at titles, and I'm the one who came up with that. So if we have a better suggestion, I'm open to suggestions.
Well, I say we not be too swift in our judgment.
Yeah. We won't leap into judgment there. Definitely. Okay, so our timeline for the episode is first age 390. So we're a few years after the Stockade battle. So in the meantime, Haleth has been gathering her people, and they've been kind of recovering from the battle, and they're preparing to set out? Or they've kind of been wandering?
So they've gotten as far as the borders of Doria.
Right.
So they've gathered and made a decision to move east.
Okay.
And then they hit an obstacle. And
Giant
they were
forest,
instructed
sure.
to just hang out and wait until Thingol got back to them.
Right.
So that's kind of how things open with them, is they're just hanging out in Sidoria.
And having a tribe of humans settled for multiple seasons and possibly years on the outskirts of his land is doubtless going to sweeten Thingol's attitude towards this whole situation, I would have to think.
Definitely.
Where do we have, because I know we've talked about this before, the depiction of the girdle and such, like, is the girdle right, like, can they access the trees is what I'm wondering here? Like, is the, like, will they have been felling trees, or can they not get close enough to the trees to fell them? That's what I'm just kind of trying to picture that there. I mean, they might not want to be in the forest itself, but like, and yet they will have need of wood, right? So, I mean, it'd be at least tempting.
Right. The area outside there, the plain, is not exactly covered in trees.
Right.
So
right. Exactly.
And the girdle might not extend to the absolute tree line in all places. Like, I'm sure it the boundaries probably don't match the edge of the forest.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I mean, presumably, like, I'm going to go ahead and guess that, like, some of the trees on the edge of the forest where the girdle was originally set up might have dropped some seeds, right? It's possible the forest has grown a little bit, you know, even like, 50 feet or something, you know, over the last, you know, few hundred years. And if so, I doubt Melian's, like, you know, stretching out the girdle to match it, right? So yeah, so it's easy to imagine. Of course, you see, of course, where I'm going with this, right? Like, where for the, you know, the elves of Doriath to come out to be so had the. And they find, like, you know, this whole stretch of woods on the edge of the girdle clear cut, right, for them to be building their sheds and cabins that they've been living in. Like, that's not going to go well, right? I think that's going to be I don't think it's strike one, but I don't know what number strike that's going to be. But I think it's got to count, I think. But anyway, okay. So sorry, here I am getting ahead of myself. So there they are, the Halladine now up by Doriath. So rather than having separate plot lines, you are having 3 interwoven plot lines. That's one of the things that I was finding most interesting about this episode. That because we've been doing a lot of jumping around, right? Like the A plot and the B plot have often been quite separate. Even if, you know, we try to connect them or parallel them in some way, you know, we were doing like a Gondolin plot and, you know, a Nargothrond plot. So these are all interlocking, all interrelating. So the A plot was Doriath's reaction to the arrival of men, focusing on Thingol and his attitude towards them. And I'm really, really glad that we're doing that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. Of course, there's a lot of risk here. We have to be... Thingol's character is one I think we've got to manage really carefully, right? In a lot of ways. But anyway, but we know that he, you know, banned men from coming in. Why does he do that? Like, just out of pure xenophobia? What's going on? So there's clearly some good opportunity to develop that. The B plot is the unfriendship of the Green Elves, their reaction to men encroaching on their territory. And this, of course, we talked about this way back when we discussed this plot. We talked about Galadriel as the point of view character there. Galadriel and Celeborn still on their honeymoon. They're in Osirian, and them being the one to kind of negotiate, right? The Green Elves not interested in holding discussions with the humans as they come through, and Galadriel and Celeborn being a little bit more willing. We know Galadriel does this kind of thing, right? I mean, diplomacy, not necessarily saying that, like, making friends and smoothing everything over is her number one goal, but interacting with folks, being a representative to, you know, bridging that kind of gap is a thing that she's definitely known for. And then the C plot, the people of Haleth going around Doriath. And by the way, one of the really interesting things about Nandangortheb is we get very few details. Like, it's not that we're told nothing, but we get very few details about what it's actually like. Like, we know it's horrible, right? We know it's very, very difficult, and almost nobody does it, and very few people survive it. But it's not like what exactly makes it so horrible is kind of vague in the text. Like, we're not given a lot of detail. Is it mostly physical danger? Like, because there are monsters? Like, there are monsters, right? Is that the problem? Is it mostly okay except for the monsters? Or is there some... But there also are passages which suggest a more sort of magical or sort of spiritual, you know, weirdness that messes with people's minds, and then Nandangortheb. So the challenge of depicting that, and we've already been there, right? I mean, we've been there with Aredhel, but Aredhel's different. She's by herself, and she's very strong, and she's one of the Noldor. We're gonna get the full effect of Nandangortheb when we bring the Halladine through, right? And really sort of show the trauma and the difficulty and the suffering involved in going through Nandangortheb. So that's something I've been looking forward to kind of thinking through more, because it strikes me, it's one of those things. It strikes me as a really good example of those things which are easy to say in prose, right? Like, the way was terrible, and they, like, you can say in a couple sentences, you can evoke this sort of ominous and frightful atmosphere and state the fact that, like, very few of them are able to make it through, or how hard it was for Haleth to bring her people through, as Tolkien says in the Silmarillion. But you don't have to, like, show it, right? When you show it on screen, you've got to do something, right? I mean, what do you do? Just, like, have them go and, looking around and there's mist and fog and creepy music, or how do we handle that, without making it, because of course would be really easy for a visual depiction of this to make it campy or dumb or less effective, right?
If you're okay with jokes, you could always go the Princess Bride route, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Little summer home here,
exactly.
Unusual size.
Yeah. No, I mean, the two scenes that were in my head as I've been talking about that are, first, that one, and then secondly, the scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail right before they meet the knights who say "Ni," like the creepy forest with the mist, when they're like, you get like, Graham Chapman looking around with the big huge eyes right before the knight looms up in front of them, right? Like, those are the two scenes that were exactly in my head as I was describing that. And,
we're hoping for something a little more serious.
Exactly. This, but that's the point, is it's an easy kind of scene to make fun of, right? As they do. Like, you can parody that kind of effect relatively easily, as they do in The Princess Bride and the Holy Grail. But to actually pull it off is a lot harder. So yeah, we'll have to see. All right, so let's dig into things here. A plot. Thingol resisting any interaction between men and Doriath. So you chose to start this on, I'm using you in the plural, I'm kind of blaming everything on you, Marie. But you guys chose to basically start this plot with a dream by Thingol, a recurring dream, right? So you wanted to put this from the beginning in the context, essentially, of foresight by Thingol, right?
Right. The idea is that he's not simply saying that men can't come through because he's xenophobic. Like, right. He is actually xenophobic, but
right.
There's a cause behind this. Mm-hmm. And we showed at the end of season 4 that he was having troubling dreams associated with men entering into Beleriand.
Right.
But we wanted to give the audience at least some understanding of why these dreams would be concerning to him.
Right.
While also allowing for interpretation that might not mean what he thinks it means.
Yes. I thought that was a really interesting choice. And of course, it's especially delightful to people who know the story, right? It's particularly funny that he has a dream about a huge, enormous, horrible wolf who invades Doriath and starts ripping it up. And he's immediately doing an allegorical interpretation of this, right? Okay, so what does the wolf represent? When, of course, the joke is everybody who knows the Silmarillion knows that he's having a foretelling of a literal, huge, ravening wolf who's going to invade Doriath, which is great. I love that. It's not just that he's misinterpreting it, right? It's not like that he's doing the allegory wrong. It's just that he assumes it's allegory when it's actually not allegory at all. Yeah. And that's hilarious.
He's trying a little too hard.
He really is. But it's perfectly plausible, right? I mean, especially since, even if he were to have an extremely realistic dream about Silmaril-infused Karkaroth, it's going to look implausible, right? There's no real reason to suspect that that's in fact a realistic dream. So yeah, I love it. I love it. Now, the one question that I had, which again, and it's not that I'm disagreeing or anything, but it was just why his reading seemed a little bit weak, right? I mean, like that the wolf, that he should connect the wolf with humans. Like, I believe that the wolves that are, the wolf that is like, it is an allegory of this new race of humans that have come into Beleriand. Like, does he have some kind of justification? I mean, we can just kind of see his prejudice showing, I guess, but.
No, the idea would be that he's had multiple dreams like this, and at least in some of the dreams, there would be humans first, and then the wolf appears. Right. So his premonition is that as soon as a human enters Doriath, following on their heels is this giant ravening wolf. Right. Which is, of course, true.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the human is going to bring the wolf. Yeah.
So the connection to the human bringing the wolf should be in the dream somehow.
Right.
It might not be in this particular one, though, because we might just show the wolf. And so when he explains to Melian, I had that dream again, he can explain that it was... He can give a reason for why he thinks it's humans that are going to cause the problem.
So he does have a concrete, like a context of dream-based reason to connect it with humans.
Exactly.
Because without that, I was going to say, it seems like a reach on his part, right? I mean, like, of all the things that could be depicted in your ominous prophetic dream as a ravening wolf, like, humans are... You got to be a little bit down the list, don't they? I mean, but right, okay. So that makes it a little bit clearer, right? Nick says Baron enters pursued by wolf, right? Something like that. Yeah. And Nick, of course, no, you're right. Nick was making it explicit in the comments, and he's right. I should do that. That's why I found it so funny and so delightful about Tolkien's dislike of allegory, right? So like it's another, like, it's like an inside joke within an inside joke, right? That Tolkien fans know that the inside joke is that the Tolkien fans know this is literally Karkaroth, right? So they see through it, and there's, fun and kind of amusing dramatic irony, but then there's that extra level, right? The inside joke inside that, which is real Tolkien fans will know that Thingol's doing it wrong, right? Because he's interpreting it allegorically, and there's your problem, Thingol. Yeah. No, that's good stuff right there. That's classic. Okay, so Melian, of course, is going to give him a warning, which he's probably not going to heed. Is that the direction we're going? So now, my biggest question here with Thingol. Where do we want to position Thingol's character here? Like, what kind of audience reaction to Thingol are we shooting for in this episode as a whole? Because to me, this is one of my first biggest questions, right? Because we've talked before about how we want to be. It's really easy to let things roll too quickly with Thingol, right? We want, ideally, and I'm pretty sure we've said this before, but ideally, when he does his thing with Beren, right? When he pronounces his doom with Beren, it should be kind of shocking, right? Luthien is shocked. We should feel a little shocked too, I think. Not like stunned, not like it's a total character reversal on Thingol's part, but we definitely don't want him to look like a bad guy, right? So go ahead.
Right. We wanted the seeds of what's coming to be visible.
Yeah.
This is essentially the last scene we get before the Beren and Luthien situation.
Okay. So this is the last Thingol scene we get before Beren and Luthien?
That Thingol would be...
Okay. Uh-oh.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I realize my connection might be a little slow right now.
Yeah, we're lagging a little bit.
The goal... Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Let me fix something there. There we go. Okay. The idea is that Thingol is already kind of sidelining Melian's advice a bit.
Right.
And he is making decisions based on negative emotions, like in this case, fear. So he's doing some of the same things he's going to do in the next season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as serious yet.
Right.
Like, it's more of a minor step in that direction without it being a complete break. He's not ignoring Melian.
Right.
He's not deciding anything that sounds all that dire. He doesn't hate the men.
Right. Right. And are we going to do anything to, because Thingol already last season, right? Thingol didn't look bad. I mean, his position is understandable, but he was kind of almost already the bad guy, not quite the bad guy, not fully the bad guy last season. But you see what I mean, right? I mean, he was the one who was like, I'm going to blame Galadriel, and I'm going to kick out these other people whom we like and whom we know to be more innocent than, he's making out. And, like he was... and so we had to be careful last season not to kind of push him too far already. I'm thinking, what are we going to do in this episode to make sure that the audience can see his point, can really kind of empathize with him and see his point of view? Because that I think we would want to achieve that if we could.
Right. So they're seeing it through his point of view. So we're always going to be with him in this storyline. And we're starting with his dream. So the audience sees the dream. So as long as the dream is in fact scary,
right,
his foreboding will seem to be based on something real and be justified.
Right.
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 So it's not like he's making this up or coming out of nowhere with it. He has a real reason for this warning, and he's acting on a warning he received. Right. So it will seem a little bit more reasonable because we're getting his point of view. The idea was that in season 4, his reaction to the truth of the kinslaying was anger. Right. We saw his temper come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his final reaction was scaled back from his initial reaction.
Right.
So while his initial reaction was a fit of temper and a little heavy-handed, he was able to rein it in a little bit, so the audience could kind of feel like he didn't act in anger.
Right.
Here it's fear, not anger. So we're not seeing that quick rush to judgment or that quick lashing out. We're just seeing him being like, nope, not having any of this.
Right.
So the idea would be if you combine the worst parts of what he did last season and what he does here, what he does in season 6 should feel like it's something he would do.
Right. It's not going to seem like his character is taking an unaccountable turn.
Right. It's still going to be more than we've seen from him. He will ignore Melian more drastically than he ever has.
Right.
He will be acting in anger more clearly than he ever has. It'll be a step in a bad direction.
Right. My favorite thing about this, though, and this, of course, we've been thinking off and on, and we're going to be talking more again soon about some of the ways. I mean, because to me, one of the really fun things that we get to do throughout this season is to play on the fundamental differences of perspective between humans and elves, right? So much of the conflict, so much of the difficulty that arises between the elves and the humans is simply based on perfectly understandable assumptions that they make about each other, right? Because they have no idea the profundity of the different ways in which they look at the world because of the whole mortality-immortality thing, right? And of course, we've already highlighted that literally about mortality with the death problem and Finrod not being able to grasp the whole dying of old age concept, and his struggles with that. We have you guys have already placed in the outline another really fun example of this, and I think that we could actually, you guys may have been thinking about this already, but one of my suggestions was going to be that we could kind of play on that a little bit more forcibly, actually. Thingol, so the Haleth requests permission to go through the forest, right? To pass through the forest, and they're waiting for a long time. Like, how long? Multiple years they're waiting for the response?
That's the thing. This episode is from the elven viewpoint, so it's not entirely clear how much time is going by at various points in the episode.
Right.
So when we're with the men, it feels like it's been a while. Right. And when we're with the elves, it feels like, oh, no time at all went by. There should be that tension.
Yeah.
Where the audience is a little confused as to exactly when
Yeah.
all this stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Can we have like a child in the background who every time we come back to the scene, they walk by and they're a little bit older?
I think the entire episode doesn't take more than, say, a year time span, so probably not. But yeah, the thing is, Haleth's nephew is young enough
Right.
that he could be older at the end than he was in the beginning.
Right.
He's already a couple years older than he was in the previous episode,
Right.
and that might be a clue that
Yeah.
time has passed.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, I like that. I mean, because here's why I'm thinking that, because I was led to think of this in thinking about the interaction between Thingol and Melian, right? What if he doesn't brush her off, right? So it's not like he just flat disregards her advice to him, right? But like, he has a quick impulse, because he is a little impulsive. Thingol's a little impulsive, right? So he has his dream and he's like, okay, no way. The men are bad news. I have foreseen this. Forget it. I'm saying no. And then she cautions him. She's like, don't let your fear rule you. And so he responds to that. He does not end up changing his mind, right? He does not end up listening to her and doing something different. But he kind of compromises with her and says, well, okay, I will be patient and I will do nothing rash. I will make no rash move. So that, like, this is generosity on his part, right? To think this through carefully and to give this time to contemplate the dream, right? Which means he's going to wait for like a year or two before he actually gets back to them, because to him that's taking time for thought, right? That is to be able to have mature judgment and not being too swift to judge about this. But of course, from Haleth's perspective, he's just plain stonewalling them, right? I mean, what they're going to interpret as utter rudeness and even like disregard, even in a sense insult, right? Like, you won't even give us an answer, right? You're just gonna walk away and never even respond. Fine. Okay. So that's how it's going to be, right? So what he actually what is a compromise, like a pro-human compromise on his part, is utterly and totally understandably misinterpreted by them, because he would absolutely not get it. And like, even Melian wouldn't even, she's got to be like, have some issues with this same thing too. She's not like familiar with human time either, right? But anyway, no. So I'm not saying that she tells him to wait a couple years, right? But again, his impulse to wait a couple years or a year, or even just one full year, that would be more than long enough for Haleth to decide that this is not working, especially if we manage the seasons properly, right? Did you guys have in mind a season of the year when she makes the request?
Trying to recall if we discussed that or not.
Because what I'm thinking is like, she arrives in like late summer, like beginning to get towards autumn, right? Because her thought is, if we can go through the forest, we can at least like be somewhere like in shelter, right? We'll be able to like shelter from the winter, within the forest and within the land of the elves. Like, if it's like, got to be better, even though we're not going to take handouts and stuff because we're the Halladine, but still, if that's why she wants a straight road, right? Because she wants to get through the end of their road before winter comes, right? But then they wait, and now it's too late. So that's why she wouldn't even wait a year under normal circumstances, right? But if the season is right, she's like, okay, well, we can't go anywhere now. Now we have to winter here. So, of course, we got to cut down all these trees in order to build shelters, in order to survive the winter out here on the plain, because we can't go into the creepy forest because it's a creepy forest that doesn't let us in. But anyway, we can build shelters out here. And now it's spring, right? And she's like, okay, now it's spring, fine. But once it gets to like midsummer again, she's like, that's it, I'm out. Like, because if we're going to have to go a longer path, then, I'm not waiting on this any longer. Even if he said yes within another 3 months, then where would we be? It's almost winter again, and we'd stay. So forget it. Let's just leave while we still have time to go around. So I'm just thinking about how the seasons could impact, not only explain why she waited so long in the first place, but also help to set up the time frame essentially.
Right, and her sense of urgency and where that's coming from. Yeah, I think that could work. The parallel storyline is, of course, Galadriel visiting the Green Elves. The House of Hador people next to the Green Elves. So as long as that storyline can also work for those seasons, it shouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be okay, because she joins them for that should actually work pretty well, because the first is the encounter with the corpse that you had requested.
Yeah.
This corpse is your fault.
The corpse is my fault. I love that idea. I still love that idea.
Just being very clear on.
And I like how the corpse came out. Yeah.
So that could be in the fall with the trees being pretty bare, and it could be very disturbing looking, right?
Yeah.
And then when Galadriel visits the community of people who have come back around, because they're nomadic, it would be maybe in the summertime.
Right.
So it would be lush and green, and there'd be an abundance of food for them to be invited to be part of that. So
right.
I think those seasons would match with the story you're trying to tell with Haleth there, and I think that should all be okay.
Good. Excellent. Yeah,
I like the. I was just gonna say I like the time element. I think every opportunity we get to remind the audience, just sort of like kind of the diametric experiences of the world that these two different peoples have is good, because it's not always going to be like when we're in the thick of thing of like an individual scene or in action of a battle or something, like those kind of differences seem to fade away.
Right.
But like stories like this are like a perfect opportunity to show that time moves slow and fast depending on which of these two.
Exactly. On either side of the boundary, right? On Thingol's side of the boundary, he's like, okay, we've been a little bit. I haven't given a knee-jerk response. I've thought it through, and now it's okay.
Yeah, he's just taking a beat.
Exactly. He's just I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm gonna go talk to him, right? Whereas on the other side, they're like, we are literally older than we were, when we came here and asked this question. Like, we're not going to stay here, until we all die of old age. Forget about it. And again, it's just such a beautiful opportunity, Dave, not only, as you say, to really highlight that difference, but also to create this wonderful tension. It's really great to be able to create tension among the good guys in which nobody's actually wrong, right? Because like they're both perfectly understandable, and it's a really wonderful illustration of the kinds of issues, because even it comes up like there's this whole idea, right, which arises at various points in Tolkien's writing, right, that like it's perilous for mortals to dwell among the elves, right? Like it's like that elves and mortals don't, like, when they mix, and I don't just mean mix Baron and Luthien mix. I mean like when they live near each other, like it's that it's there are consequences to that. It does, and I think a lot of times if you don't sit back and think through a lot of these things, that's kind of hard to understand. Now, of course, I'm sure that Tolkien meant that to be rather vague and kind of, mythic as a declaration. But nevertheless, it's the more you kind of think about, what it's like and the kinds of, you can get kind of glimpses of it, right? Like Bilbo's comment about how elves seem to like poetry and song better than food, or as much as they like food and drink or more, right? You can get a glimpse of his own experience of like, living among elves is weird. Like they can just talk for days and forget to eat. And, Bilbo's not down with that. Right. So I mean, so I do, and to show this, it also has relevance in the more practical and kind of political world of Beleriand that we're building and discussing in season 5, of course, because the big question, which we're going to be moving more and more explicitly towards, is how are these two populations going to interact, right? How are they going to settle down? The main choice, of course, of the council at Estelad is going to be the big sort of tipping point, really. Because if at the Council of Estelad they decide the other way, or any of the other ways, right? If they decide to do anything but ally themselves actively with the elves, the whole situation is going to be... The Halladine are already, like, secessionist over there, right? You would just have the House of Beor as this, like, weird and sort of isolated exception, and the rest of, being this kind of uneasy, independent political state that can't be... And now, you've got to think that the elves, even if they're not afraid of the men, have got to know now they have this uncomfortable situation behind them while they're trying to focus on the siege in front of them. It's kind of a big deal. Like, the Council of Estelad is a really big deal in that way. And of course, we'll get to that. That's next time, right? Episode 6 is the council? No?
6 is the escape from Angband and Hador proving himself.
Right, of course. 7 is the council. Right, we've got to establish Hador, of course, first before we do that. Makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, but point is we're getting there, right? We're getting there. And so actually that kind of works really well, actually, to have... We sort of establish the bigger picture kind of political dilemmas or potential political dilemmas here in this episode.
Yes. And at least one character who will be at the council is in this episode.
Bereg, right? So,
yes. Yeah. Yes, we're setting up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then we have, and then of course Hador will come in, and so we'll have Hador kind of going to some extent sort of against the grain, right? We see the tensions and we see the difficulties and the kind of chasm between the elves and men. That's really kind of the emphasis of this episode. And then we'll see, Hador bridging the gap in the next episode. And then, of course, bringing that back now to the bigger question, the sort of larger political question in the Council of Estelad. So I like that a lot. Okay. Yeah, love the time thing. And again, so Stephen was suggesting, are we going to have anyone who is... So there's like his options, right? Thingol's options in response to Haleth's request, right? Are to say yes, to sort of not let them in. He said, is there anyone who's going to be voicing the third option? Right, like that is to believe the humans to be enemies, right, and actively show a more active unfriendship towards the humans. I'm not saying like go out and like slaughter them in their sleep, but nor am I suggesting that Thingol is going to acquiesce to this But is anyone going to even go there? Is anyone going to even raise that possibility? Like Cyros or somebody else we don't like?
Well, right, because the person who is reporting back to Thingol about the situation with the Halladine, so the person who has actually met and interacted with the Halladine and then goes and talks to Thingol, is Beleg.
Right.
And whatever else Beleg is, he's probably not vehemently anti-human, let's just kill them all.
No. Obviously Beleg's not going to do that. Yeah, again...
Yes, but could somebody in the council in Menegroth who hasn't... the court in Menegroth who hasn't actually seen the men, could they say something? Sure. There could be a...
Like Cyros. It's not too soon to start establishing that Cyros is a jerk. We already kind of started that back in the last season. So don't forget that Cyros the jerk is here in Doriath. Yeah. It's good to have a whipping boy that we can use for a while in Doriath for when we need somebody to be really unpleasant. But anyway, Stephen's larger point was, if that is said or talked about, right, it would give us the opportunity to have Thingol resisting that. So again, that we see he's not just like irrationally anti-human, right? He's at least a moderate voice compared to like, what he's And he's not even said no yet. Like, he's not even made his decision. He's just taking time to think. By the way, is Beleg... I was going to say is anyone, but then I think I should just say is Beleg, because he's the only one who would obviously be in this role. Is Beleg making any anthropological observations during this period? Does he get to know them at all? Or does he even watch them from a distance? Do they start filtering back like some actual empirical data about the humans during the course of this time?
Yes. So the one scene we see of Beleg reporting to Thingol, because presumably there's lots of reports we don't see.
Right.
But the one scene that we do see, he's not only talking about the Halladine, which is not to say, hey, the Halladine want an answer, but to say, hey, the Halladine already left.
Right.
So no worries about that answer.
Right. Yeah. Never mind.
And then,
yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously he would have reported the request earlier.
Right.
So
right.
We don't see that scene. And then he's also talking about the people of Estalad, the House of Hador people.
Right.
In that same conversation. So he is kind of just giving a general report of the state of East Beleriand and the different groups of men, and presumably some of his thoughts about that too.
Right.
They're not all positive. Again, with the random corpses thing is a little creepy.
Right.
The word peculiar is not how you endear somebody to Thingol.
To Thingol, yeah. I can see where that would not go over well. And no, I'm telling you, my love of the corpse subplot has only increased. Like it gets better and better all the time. Yeah.
So yeah, there could be some anthropological style commentary in there, in that Beleg would have at least observed the men.
Yeah. Do we show that he's taken an interest in them? Like that he's, that... Are we going to have any council scenes? Is it just like Thingol and Melian? Like, backroom conversation with Thingol and Melian? Or do we have any Thingol talking about this with other, counselors?
We have at least two scenes where Thingol and Beleg can discuss things.
Okay.
One is, like I said, this general report on the state of East Beleriand that Beleg is delivering.
Right.
And then towards the end of the episode, there's been reports of issues in West Beleriand. So both Thingol and Beleg travel to visit the March Wardens there to kind of see what's going on.
Right.
And so they're speaking with each other a little bit more candidly, I suppose.
Right. Right, because he's not like sitting in council and hearing from lots of people. Right. It's just him and Beleg. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, peeking ahead to that moment, I really liked getting Thingol out of Doriath. That was really cool. That was like a breath of fresh air. Like to see Thingol outside of Menegroth. I said outside of Doriath. I meant outside of Menegroth. Get him out in the sunshine.
Yeah, we do stick him in his caves and leave him there pretty much all the time.
Well, so does Tolkien. I mean, like once he gets there, do we ever see him outside? I mean, only at the Hunt of the Wolf is the only time I can think of that he leaves.
There's also the incident with Bulldog.
Well, yes, right. That one time that's implied in the Lay of Lathian, right? But yeah, I mean, we have to go that far to try to find another place where he left home. Thingol was like isolating before it was cool. But yeah, no. Anyway, the point is, there's no reason to think that he actually has been like living his whole life underground and has never seen the sun for centuries. That's why I like that. It's kind of it's a nice reminder of, hey, like he's like the lord of this realm, like the whole realm, not just Menegroth. Not just his court there in Menegroth. And I know we had him out already in the battles, with the Green Elves and the Orcs and stuff back in season. Was that 3? That was season 3?
3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that was ages ago. So, I mean, it's good to get him outside again.
He did attend Galadriel's wedding in Nargothrond at the end of season 4.
Right.
And
That's right.
that was a big deal because we weren't really sure we were allowed to take him out of Doriath for that.
Right. Right.
But we did anyway.
Right. An actual field trip. That's exciting.
Yeah. That was a field trip that involved visiting other people who are not from Doriath. So
Right.
we're done with that now. He's pretty much stuck with the people in Doriath,
Yep.
but he's at least outside of his cave.
Right. No, that's good. As I said, I just, it was a small thing, but for some reason it really struck me when I was reading the outline. I was like, wow, hey, look, here we go. Thingol in full sunlight. That's fun.
It's good to remind ourselves Thingol's a person too.
Exactly. Thingol's a person too. Likes to go on outings every now and again. Good. Okay, so let's talk about Galadriel's ambassadorial visits to Thingol. So, is that when he makes his judgment? When, like, so it's after he hears Galadriel's. So, well, hang on. Back up a step. Thingol and Galadriel, how are things there? Like, still a little tense, a little awkward.
Right. She doesn't live there anymore, and there's a reason for this.
Yeah, because it was a little uncomfortable, right? I mean, it got almost really uncomfortable, and then he kind of took that back. But yeah, a nice long honeymoon away seemed like just a thing at that time, and it's her first trip back since then, and
she's here defending people who kill each other.
Yes. I'm here to take a pro kinslaying stance, but don't take it the wrong way. Yeah, no, it's so, but that's what I wanted to try to gauge. Like, how frosty are we going to have Thingol be towards her, basically? I mean, I would think not much, right? We can show that he's, like, definitely forgiven her, like that the more active tension of because I mean the tension went pretty close to the end. I mean, we got resolution, right? We had reconciliation at the wedding in the end, but I mean, it was a one episode reconciliation after a whole season of building tension. So you know, some indication that the reconciliation did take, right, is, you know, I mean, clearly we should remember the tension, but I wouldn't want to have him still being, you know, too
the
frosty.
idea is that he's receiving her cordially and certainly not acting like he doesn't know her or anything.
Right.
You know, he's having a good, friendly enough conversation with her, but there's at least a little bit of distance there.
Mm-hmm.
They're not best friends.
Yeah.
And then she, after meeting with Thingol, has conversations with both Melian and Luthien. And those conversations should be much warmer and much more personable.
Right.
And so if at first we're like, oh, Thingol seems to be getting along fine with Galadriel, doesn't seem to be any problems here. And then we see what the actual friendly greetings look like.
Right.
Be like, oh, actually, no, Thingol was quite distant.
Right.
You know, so it's not, he's not being actively frosty, but
right. But neither is he being actively friendly or warm. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Distinctly room temperature response from Thingol to Galadriel. Get it? Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a good place to be. I think it's a good place to be.
That's it. I'd say with Thingol in general, that's a good place to be.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. But but then tell me about how it goes on, right? So she gives her report, and he's alarmed by her report about the corpses and such. And so it's in response to her report that he makes his declaration?
Correct. So he was planning to not let the Halladine through, but they stopped asking before he got around to telling them anything. So there was no need for a declaration at that time. Here, Galadriel is kind of petitioning for a little bit more elf-human cooperation and friendship.
Right.
And he's saying no to that. And in that is the time at which he's going to say, men are not going to enter Doriath ever.
Right.
And we put the declaration there because we wanted it to be between Thingol and Galadriel, who are characters we know and care about.
Right.
Rather than Thingol declaring something to his court with no men in sight and having no one there to react and be like, oh no, don't do it, Thingol. Whereas if the court's just like, yep, okay, that's how it is, it wouldn't have any weight to it.
Right.
Whereas if Galadriel's actively arguing for something different, the ban will feel like he said no to her.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And we do have in Galadriel at least a sort of advocate for the other position.
Yes.
For the other side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a more dynamic interaction than just Bellic giving his report.
Right.
And so that's why it's at that point in the episode. And it's given the audience a chance to maybe hope for a different outcome.
Right.
Maybe to be like, oh, well, he had that dream and he didn't like men, but he realized that his delay scared the men away. Maybe he'll say something different this time now that Galadriel's there to be advocate. But no. And so it just felt like that was where the tension of that decision should lie.
I like that. Now, how are we going to do the declaration? Because when he makes the declaration in the Silmarillion, it's so we get the response from Melian, right? Melian gets the foresight that a mortal man shall indeed pass the girdle. But is he going to deliver it as simply like a... I'm just trying to think of the context. He's going to so this is going to be a purely like political / judicial judgment on his part, right? Him just saying, based upon what I have heard, I conclude that these humans are dangerous, and not to mention, my scary dreams, have concluded that humans are dangerous, and so I decree that humans are... Or is it going to be more along the lines of like a sort of inspiration, or almost like a foretelling, that like, I say to you, no human shall, cross... Because, I mean, the context of those things is like, basically, is it going to be... I have considered all of these options, and here is my reasoned response to all of these things. Or is it going to sound more impulsive, which could have authority, right? I mean, again, foretelling is a thing, right? So, he could try to pass it off that way, even convince himself that, he knows what is best, right? He has intuited what is the best thing for Doriath and declared it. What do we think about that?
I'm trying to think of how reasonable or unreasonable the audience should think he is at this moment in time.
Right.
And partly Galadriel saying there's a reason they have capital punishment isn't really that convincing. So Thingol being dismissive of the people in Estelad feels reasonable enough.
Right.
Like, it would be a stretch to accept them. However, in the midst of that conversation, Galadriel brings up the men who are currently living in Nargothrond with Finrod.
Right.
Saying it's been a good relationship. Finrod has no complaints. Like, these people are good people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And Finrod is someone who's on pretty good terms with Thingol.
Yes.
And he's still dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, like, no, we're not talking about those people, and even so, they're not allowed in here either.
Right.
So when he gets to that part of it, and that's where he gives his declaration after he's already dismissed the House of Beor as well.
Right.
It seems like the audience should be expecting a forceful, emphatic declaration, but not necessarily a well-reasoned one.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's hard under all of those circumstances, especially with the House of Beor, and especially with the way that we've changed the House of Beor with their residence in Nargothrond. It's hard to make it a purely rational conclusion on his part, because it's not super rational. I mean, it's just kind of however we tried to slice it. I don't think we could make it that way, really. So it seems to me that something like, Nick was suggesting, that it could be kind of both. Like, it could start off in the vein of like a prophetic declaration, like an insight, which needn't be wrong, by the way, right? There's lots of prophetic things he could say about humans and the destruction that they will bring, which could be perfectly true, right? So, like, what if even he had some kind of... it doesn't seem very relevant to him. I was thinking of some kind of like vague foretelling of like, you know, even like the treachery of Uldor and all that, you know, like some glimpse, right, of the fact that through humans great suffering is going to be brought. Like he's not, if he said something like that, he wouldn't be wrong, right?
He could say something like that in terms of the capital punishment issue. Like if they're willing to kill each other, how can we trust what they would do to us, or how
Right.
they would treat us, which would point towards Uldor without actually.
And he could have, or it doesn't have to be a specific insight of Uldor doesn't make sense because Uldor's betrayal is really distant from Thingol himself. So it would seem weird for a foretelling of a remote and irrelevant to him event like that to come upon him. But it just doesn't seem to fit the pattern of foretellings that we see in Tolkien. So I would be, but again, a more, not a prophecy of an event, but like an insight into a trend, basically. Like, for instance, he could have the perfectly true and valid prophetic insight that many of that, like, these men have served, you know, my heart tells me that these men have, you know, these men have served Morgoth before and will serve him again. And, you know, and therefore, you know, we would be rash to trust them. Totally fair, right? Totally true. But of course, wrong as regards the Edain, right? Wrong as regards the Kingdom Amendment, but not wrong as regards humans entirely. So it's, and again, you know, we'll see both sides, right? We will go on to show how his the truth of what he says, but also, you know, how and the ways in which he was wrong and was doing wrong to the people, like to the those they who shall be the house of Hador. We need to figure out something to call them. I'm sick of calling them the people who will become the house of Hador.
I've been calling them the people of Estelad, if that helps.
Estelad, yeah.
That's good.
Or we could call them what would they be? The Esteladians?
The Esteladians.
The Esteladians? The Estolads?
Well,
I don't know, but
it also sounds, you know, dangerously close to Estee Lauder.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it makes, yeah, exactly. There could be we could get into copyright infringement if we're not careful there. So I suppose, but yes.
So I got a question. What if Thingol's sort of his premonition really has more to do with events as they will indeed eventually unfold, and so maybe it has less to do with specific like treachery or destruction, but just sort of like if you look at like what Thingol is trying to achieve, particularly working with Melian with the girl and stuff. It's all about like basically keeping it's like it's one of these ultimate elven acts of preservation. Like let's wall off Doriath from the rest of the world so that we can kind of just keep things the same and be protected. And he kind of realizes that the arrival of people is like sort of a wave of change, of like, you know, sort of inevitable change coming along, and that letting them into Doriath will allow change to come and undo everything that he's doing, which is, I mean, basically exactly what happens once Beren arrives. It starts this like chain of events that leads to everything changing, including eventual destruction.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Dave. It would be more powerful if his premonition were in fact an accurate premonition about Beren's coming. Even if, again, sort of misapplied by him and even misunderstood by him. I mean, we've already seen him misinterpreting stuff, right? So that we're prepared for that. But yes, that change, of course, especially since change is our theme, I really like that. You know, for the season, that it helps to emphasize several things, right? One, the perfectly true and legitimate fact that the elves in general are anti-change and the humans in general like change is the air that they breathe, right? So there's definitely, and so again, he's not wrong that when humans enter into the elvish realms, change comes along with them. It's part of what happens there. You're definitely wrecking your static elvish situation that you're trying to create or maintain. But of course, as you say, Dave, of course, with Doriath in particular and with Beren in particular, there's going to be some major change that happens in Doriath as a direct consequence of the arrival of men. So that's not wrong. It's even, I mean, he could even have, remember, what's the word? What's the word about what happens to him? Like his grief when Luthien dies. Luthien returns to him and heals what's the word? It's not Twilight. It's not the something of Thingol.
What is that?
It was something. It wasn't grief, but it was age. I think it was like.
Yeah. There's like a metaphorical word that he uses. It's like, what is it?
All right, people in the comments.
Yeah.
Nope.
Winter? Is it winter?
Oh,
Julie?
I think
The winter of
I think
Thingol?
it's winter. Yeah, I think
that sounds close. I'm thinking like frost. No, it's not twilight. It's the winter of Thingol. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking, Dave. What if he has he could even have a vision of that, right? He could even have a vision of himself locked in grief, right? And the whole court mourning, and know that something, and know with like deep and absolute prophetic certainty that this grief has come when this is the grief that will come if humans come into Doriath, because he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Is it winter? Did you find it, Murray?
It is.
It is winter. Great. Yes. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that.
Nice work, Julie.
Yeah.
And it just says the winter of Thingol, not like his grief or.
Yes, the winter of Thingol. Yeah. It's just the metaphorical phrase. That's what I was recalling. So yeah, if he has some kind of glimpse of that, right? His own grief and his own winter, right? The winter of Thingol, the winter of the court. Like he sees this, kind of sees and senses this, and again, and can know with absolute and perfectly justified conviction that this is a consequence. This is what's going to happen if humans come to Doriath. The other,
I think also.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this angle also sort of achieves the dual goal of making his behavior and decision making like understandable, and even relatable, but also clearly wrong. Right.
Also clearly wrong, and it even sets things up for next season, right? I mean, when he's not just a xenophobe and or an overprotective father when he does what he does with Beren. Instead, he's what's his name? Laius, Oedipus's dad, right? Trying to prevent the horrible thing that he knows is going to happen. And now a human is here, right? And so he's like, well, okay, maybe if I send him away and make sure he dies, I can prevent it from happening. And of course, by doing this, he's making sure that the thing happens. And recapitulating that kind of Oedipus cycle, of foretelling and fulfillment of prophecy. I mean, that's... that seems to me to fit perfectly congenially in Tolkien's world. So, I mean, we see that kind of thing, like the Witch King, for instance, and his triumphing. I know it's Macbethian, but Shakespeare didn't make that up either. So, anyway, so yeah, I like that, Dave. I think that we could get a bunch of payoff, I think, from that kind of insight. So. Having said all this, Maria, I'm not necessarily saying that all of this needn't even necessarily be spelled out really perfectly. A lot of what we were just suggesting could be folded into just a few lines that he delivers at the beginning, like as he's rolling up to his final pronouncement, right? And the other thing that I kind of like about this is that there's a risk. There is a risk of him. I'm thinking about Galadriel and Galadriel's reaction, right? If she comes in and they're like, okay, but, you know, not BFFs clearly, and then she gives her report and she's actively advocating for, like, give men a chance, and his response is not only no, but heck no, it kind of sounds like potentially like a like sharp plateau of tension between the two of them, which might be more than we want, really, at that point. What I'm saying is, if he ramps up to it in this way, she's gonna respect that, right? I mean, one of the things about foretellings in Tolkien is that they come upon people, right? They come upon people sort of spontaneously. But the other thing about foretellings is that otherwise people who hear them know that they're foretellings and respect them, right? Foretellings are not generally greeted with skepticism, not among, you know, the wise, right? So Galadriel's going to hear him, and she's going to be like, well, okay. You know, she might still disagree with him, but she's gonna respect the foretelling, right?
Right. She doesn't have to disagree with him to his face.
Right.
And she can just ask questions when she has conversations with Melian and Luthien.
Right.
I'm like, wait, really? Are you guys sure? Does this sound right to you? Kind of.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And at the end of the day, she's gonna auditioning.
Right. Okay, hang on a second. We're
She's
losing you a little
take
her
his message back
right.
to the humans.
Right.
So, and the message is, oh, sorry. But yeah, her message is going to be based on what Thingol says. So she does not disagree with him. So she does accept.
Yeah. And I think that makes that easier, so that we don't have her going back and just being like, man, I tried, but like that guy is irrational and there's no talking to him. So, you know, what are we supposed to do? Like that's not her perspective. She can still disagree with him. She can still think he's wrong, right? Or think that this is the wrong move or the wrong direction to go, but she can still kind of, we don't have to have her just like rolling her eye and face palming, you know, after she leaves, right? She'd be like, okay, well, you know, all right. So guys, Doriath is a no-go, but let's continue trying to move forward here, right? It puts her in an easier position to do that too. So I think that's another advantage of that kind of foretelling. I like that a lot, Dave. I think that's a great suggestion. Now, the final step in Thingol's trajectory in this episode, though, is when he meets Haleth again, right on the west side of Nandangortheb when they come out, right? And this is on his road trip, right, with Beleg when he's off at the marches, and they're investigating problems that their own march wardens have had, right? You know, they're going to a place which is dangerous by Doriath March Warden standards. And there they find the Halladine emerging and looking around in that dangerous place and saying, whew, oh, it's nice to be somewhere nice and friendly like this by comparison to where we just came, right? Yeah, they come out and they're like, we're thinking of building a summer home here, right? So, yeah, I think that's really cool. And so his reaction, he's shocked, he's stunned, is he disturbed? Is he Beleg is admirers. We know that Beleg is going to really admire them, right? So Beleg is going to be he's going to want to be friends with Haleth from here on out because he thinks she's really cool, right? And really admires them. What's the difference between Beleg's, I would think, unequivocally positive and admiring response and Thingol's? Are we going to have any kind of distinction there?
Yes. They don't actually speak to one another until the next episode. So
right.
We'll end this episode with Thingol seeing them come out of the woods.
Right.
So we don't get his full reaction other than what he says to Beleg. But yeah, he's more just surprised. Like, oh,
right.
whoa.
Yeah.
Where did these people come from. And
Right.
yeah, Beleg's the one who takes it that step further and is impressed.
Right.
And we'll see that in the next episode when Beleg ends up being kind of the go-between for Haleth and Thingol, because Haleth and Thingol will meet, but they're both way too proud to actually work anything out.
Yes. That's going to be a really fun meeting. Thingol and Haleth. That is fantastic. Yeah. No, that is going to be all kinds of fun.
Yeah. She keeps running into these really obnoxiously tall, proud elf lords and wanting nothing to do with them.
She's really meeting the cream of the crop, isn't she? Right? First Caranthir and then Thingol. Yeah. It's too bad she didn't meet Eowl, on the way. Right.
Do the trifecta.
Right, you're right. The low lights of elven character in Beleriand. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
There's a reason the House of Baelor was all like, let's go live with Finrod.
Right. Exactly.
And Haleth is no, thank you.
Right. Yeah. No, it is.
But Beleg will be an exception.
Beleg will be an exception. Absolutely. So, did you have dialogue in mind, like a line in mind for what he says to Beleg, Thingol, when he's like, because I don't have a line exactly, but I was thinking about like how to characterize his response, right? Like what, and my first thought is, his thought would not be, I can't believe they did that, but rather, how did they get here? Like something must have, he would assume, right? Obviously they didn't walk through Nanda, but how else? Like, how did they get here? What happened? Like somebody must have helped them or transported them, or like something absolutely crazy must have happened, because I would think that he would probably dismiss out of hand the possibility that they had actually walked through Nandangortheb to get here. Beleg's going to have to tell him that these are the same people, right? So like the conversation, not in exactly these words, goes something like Beleg looks out and says like, "Holy cow, those are the people that, like, Thingol's like, who are those people?" And Beleg's like, "Holy cow, those are the people who are over on the western side." And Thingol's like, how on earth did they get here? How does that even make sense? Right? How is that even possible? And then Beleg would be like, I have no idea, or he could say perhaps something a little bit more sympathetic, like, I can't even imagine, what must have happened, or what they must have gone through, or something like that. Indicating that his imagination is more quickly than Thingol's going to the I can imagine not only their courage but their suffering, right? Since the last time I saw them, whereas that's not Thingol's first thought. I'm not saying we make him suspicious or hostile or anything, but just that doesn't occur to him.
He's more concerned with the how and less concerned with the accepting sort of what's in front of his eyes, what they must have gone through.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, like, if there was some kind of chicanery up there right on the borders of his realm, like what did they get through the girdle, and go inside through the north part of the forest? Like, is that what happened? Yeah, there's got to be something, and it's going to be alarming to him. But yeah, okay, awesome. Well, that was a lot of stuff about Thingol, but that was really cool. Let's think about the B plot. Let's go back to Galadriel now. Run it back a little bit, and let's talk about corpses hanging in trees. So, the Green Elves are complaining. Now, their complaint, the future Estoladians are, they're nomadic peoples, right? They're nomadic herdsmen, we decided, right? Was that what we decided? Okay.
That's what we decided. I hope you're cool with it.
That sounds good. I'm cool with that. No, we had homesteaders, right? And we had, pioneers, basically, with the House of Baelor. We didn't, nomadic herders. That works for me. what do the Green Elves complain about exactly? The felling of, because I mean, if they're nomadic, they're not going to be like clear cutting land and building houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's kind of a threefold complaint. The first is that one of the types of animals they herd are hogs, and they've released their hogs into the forests of Assyrian on the other side of the river from where they're encamped.
Right.
And
which is convenient.
so pigs are kind of destructive to the
Right.
territory.
Right.
And
right.
the Green Elves are not okay with random pigs showing up in their land.
Right.
So that's the first complaint. The second complaint is corpse hanging in the tree. We don't like this. Why is this on our side of the river?
Yes.
We didn't want anything to do with that. And then cutting down trees because they are nomadic, but when they move into this area for whatever time of year they're hanging out down here, then they're gonna cut firewood and such from the forest.
Yeah.
So while they're there, they cause destruction too, and then they move on. So just that three-prong, like, these people are terrible, and we don't want them here.
Right.
Is basically what the Green Elves.
Absolutely, it makes all kinds of sense. Here's what your outline. Let me tell you right away about the way that your outline made me love the hanging corpse even more. I love the way in which the hanging corpse establishes this motif that runs through like all the plots. It's really cool. Well, less so the C plot, but at least the A and B plot, right? Because like on the one hand, you've got the kind of interplay or the kind of mirroring almost, right, of the judicial situation among the humans, which led to the capital punishment, right? Is the thing which is leading to Thingol's judicial declaration against the humans, right? And of course, setting up in particular, Thingol deliberately dooming to death a human, the first human he's ever going to meet in his court, Baron. So the way that it kind of, this whole like, oh yes, like, sentencing, deeming a doom which sends people to death is horrible and barbaric. Isn't that awful? Like, these people must be terrible. I love the way that it anticipates the Baron situation. And again, the fact that, and I don't know if Galadriel would go here because it's only kind of after the fact that's going to become clear. Like after he makes his judicial proclamation, is when the parallel I think is going to become more clear. But I wonder if Galadriel doesn't see it. Right? If Galadriel does not perceive the fact that it is that same judicial impulse, that there are parallels, in fact, between the decisions that led the humans to hang that person and the things that are leading Thingol to make the judgment, the anti-human judgment that he is. So I like the way in which the hanging corpse almost, not only it literally, it's going to be discussed and is going to be one of the motivations for Thingol to make his decision. I like the way that it kind of thematically sort of ties them together as well. This is, judicial proclamations are one of the like motifs of the whole episode in that way. So I like that. I think it's really good. And of course, just another wonderful opportunity. And that I didn't foresee when we had talked about this originally, but this second point I did foresee. This is one of the things that we talked about before, about the wonderful ways in which it also provides another great opportunity for misunderstanding of two groups of people, neither of whom is really in the wrong, right? I mean, like the whole kinslaying thing, it looks bad. It looks really bad. From an elvish point of view, they are completely justified from their own context in being extremely dubious of anyone who, I mean, that's, it's orc work. Some would call that, right? That kind of carrying on. And yet from the human standpoint, it's totally different on the human side. And I like that. So
it is. It's just it can be as necessary as you want it to be, but saying, no, 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 don't worry. They only have capital punishment because they need it.
Right.
Doesn't really
No,
endear them to the
it
elves
doesn't
any
make it
better.
better. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
you have to understand. Yeah, sometimes people in their community kill each other or commit other horrible crimes, and really this
That's
is all
right.
that they can do about it.
That's right. In
It's
order to
not
prevent,
a
this
very
kind of
endorsement.
in order to prevent this kind of murder and treachery and rape from spreading through the whole community, they've got to take strong steps. So it's fine. Really, you should be glad to have them as neighbors. No, I agree. I mean, it's a hard argument to make. Which is one of the things I want to get to. That is exactly how does Galadriel make this argument. But okay, so the Green Elves come to Galadriel. Why? Why do the Green Elves come to Galadriel? Again, I mean, I know why she's interacting with them, right? I mean, she's like visiting the in-laws, right? So that's fine. But why
Right,
did...
so she's been living in Assyrian for the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
And she's talking to like her sister-in-law, and she hears about this grievance with the humans, and so she kind of takes it upon herself to investigate.
Right. Okay.
So she's now visiting the borders of Assyria, and she wasn't there before, and this other Green Elf community lives over there and showing her around, being like, look, this is the problem, this is why we don't like these people.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
this is the issue. So she's hearing about it firsthand from the Green Elves, and then decides to play ambassador.
Great. No, and that's perfect, because that Galadriel would stick her nose into other people's business seems perfectly appropriate, and an indication of, we've already showed in season 4 her changing, right? We showed a major sort of moral and emotional crisis on Galadriel's part, and that she was clearly not the same person at the end of the season that she was at the beginning of the season. So a lot of the like more pure, I'm following in Feanor's footsteps kind of element to her character that we had in season 2 has been already kind of worn away from her, right? But there's it's not completely gone, right? There's still, this desire for her to be an important and influential person guiding and leading, she wants to be both Thingol and Melian, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, they're both role models in a sense, for not that Thingol is an active role model for her exactly, but she wants to rule. She wants to, excuse me, I'm sorry, Celeborn is ruling. Everybody knows that. But anyway, that's yeah. So it seems to fit, but it fits nicely in a way that doesn't make her look really bad, right? I mean, you might kind of think twice about this and say, why is Galadriel butting into this? But it's like for good reasons, right? I mean, she's got a lot to offer, to this situation, and most likely her intervention is going to do much good, right? So I'm not saying it's questionable. I'm not saying we make her look bad in doing it, but it is a nice little kind of like footnote. Notice how Galadriel is still putting herself forward, is still, kind of being aggressive in this way. It's still part of her. I mean, the very long arc of Galadriel's character development, right, which is not going to have its final climax until the Fellowship of the Ring, is, we have a long ways to go on that one. So, we need to still be building that. Good. So anyway, point is, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. When she talks to the Green Elves, what's their plan? Like, they weren't planning on her playing ambassador, right? They don't necessarily have to have a determined course of action or anything, but like, what were they? I mean, they have to have been discussing it among themselves. Did they have any ideas, suggestions? Like, were they gonna attack them? Were they just gonna say like, okay, we're making a rule: any human and or pig who steps, 1 foot or trotter across the river is getting an arrow in the face? Like, were they gonna have like a really aggressive policy like that, or were they gonna send an embassy? Were they like, sitting around in a circle saying like, who's not it, to go talk to the humans and ask them to please take their pigs to the other side of the river? Like, do we have any sense of where the Green Elves were on this before she stepped in to their relief? Uh-oh.
I think we might have lost her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. It's been having some connection difficulties. Nick is reminding us that, of course, we have to remember that...
Starting to shoot because, this is enough of this.
Hang on. Oh, we lost her there. Had her briefly. We recovered
I think I'm back.
There you are. You're back now.
You're
yes.
back. There we go.
Sorry about that. The idea is that they are just very frustrated. They're not thinking about doing an embassy.
Okay.
So they are maybe thinking about shooting people because they're sick of this.
Right. So they're preparing to take. So basically, it is pretty clear that the situation is likely to devolve soon and emphatically if Galadriel doesn't step in. And they were not contemplating an embassy. That wasn't on the table. Not that they have tables, but like in as much as politically they have no tables. So no one, they didn't elect an executive officer of the week to go. No. Okay. That's the Green Elves. Right. And as Nick is reminding us, the Green Elves are totally cool with murdering non-elves. Like they have a track record of that, from season three, right? Conflict with the dwarves, season 3.
True.
So, yeah. Okay.
Surprisingly bloodthirsty.
Yeah, or, casual. No, they don't go looking for it, but it's they have opinions. Right. Okay. Good. So Galadriel shows up in the village of the Halladines, and how does that go? How do they respond? So she's got to. How much taller is she on average? Is she taller than everybody? I mean, these are the people who are going to be the House of Hador. They're really tall, generally, right? So she's not going to be like a foot taller than they are.
No, I mean, she could be taller, but it's not going to be extreme.
Right.
The idea is that she is an elf walking into their village, so she's impressive.
Yeah.
And Celeborn's with her. I'm not sure how impressive he is, but he's there.
Walking half a step behind her. Yeah. Like Prince Philip. Sure.
So their reaction is a little bit of awe and what
Fear?
Is this person doing here?
Fear? I mean,
it's very out of the ordinary.
Some of them would have to be probably. I mean, okay. Hang on. Another question. Have they had direct interactions with the Green? Do they know that the Green Elves dislike them?
Only if they've been shot at before.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
The Green Elves haven't talked to them.
That's what I'm trying. Yeah.
I mean, it can be ramped up as much as you want it to be. Presumably, there's been at least some altercations prior to this.
I would think so. So like that, there would be some people who would be hostile. Right, like family members of folks who have been shot at by elves before, right? But at the same time, it's Galadriel, by which I don't just mean that she's Galadriel and awesome and beautiful and all that sort of thing, but also that she's a Noldor and is therefore going to look very. She's a Noldor, so it's going to look very different from the Green Elves. They're not going to actually. I mean, even they are going to be able to tell that this is somebody different, right? This is not the same as those folks that have been shooting at us from the trees, right?
Right. And therefore they're at least willing to entertain her visit and see what she's there. They might, keep their kids indoors or something until they know what's really going on.
Right.
But
right. Yeah,
but they're not gonna challenge her and start shooting at her before she walks in.
Right. But probably they're not. We did already with Beor, right? And Finrod, we did the mistaking for a god thing. Is that on the table again? I mean, are there going to be? I mean, we could have a variety, right? Like we could have some people, hostile, right? Like my brother was shot by an elf, and this is another one of those, with he's, and I'm going for my hatchet, but we could have others who are like, is this a goddess? Should I bow? Right? Like, who might have that kind of reaction. Yeah. Right. As Nick says, and she's glowy, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, Calaquendi, right? I mean, it's Calaquendi still not long from the Blessed Realm. It's going to be visible in some and perceptible in multiple ways, I would think. That would disarm the hostility.
A variety of reactions makes sense, ranging from all to hostility, so that we understand that not everyone feels the exact same way.
Right. That it's a tense situation, and she's not just going to be able to waltz in and command these primitives what they should be doing. How's her? What is her approach? Like how does she comport herself? How does she what does she say to the people? Does she is she well, hang on. Before we even say that, what is she thinking? Like, what is her attitude towards them before she enters into their camp? She's heard the Green Elves. She can see that the situation needs defusing, right? So she's going in with the intention of trying to establish peace. But what does she know about humans? I mean, is she going in there being like, these are savage, barbaric cretins, but I have to somehow talk them around? Or is she like, is there a reason why she's willing to see their point of view? Like, what do we think? I'm trying to think of any background.
She has not met humans before. This is her first encounter with humans.
Yeah.
I think her goal going in is to convince them to stop doing the things that the Green Elves are complaining about.
Right.
Like a very clear idea that if she can just tell them not to do a handful of things, they won't be getting themselves in trouble anymore.
Right.
So that's like her goal, is just to convey the stop doing these problematic behaviors. She's not terribly impressed by what she sees at first. I mean, it's an encampment of nomads.
Yes.
It's not exactly a Noldor palace.
Right.
So she considers them maybe not going to write them off as savages as quickly as the Green Elves have, but she can see why the Green Elves think that. So she's giving them a chance, but she doesn't have a high opinion to start with.
And she probably doesn't expect all that much. The only thing that I can think of when I'm trying to think back to like any kind of allusion or reference to, because of course there's so few Galadriel references that Tolkien wrote back into this material, fully. One of the big references to Galadriel in the Silmarillion, the published Silmarillion, is her response to Feanor's speech, which included the bit about the second race coming and trying to take over things, right? So I think that's what's influencing me to imagine that Galadriel's first assumption might be wary. Now, again, it's Fëanor. She doesn't trust Fëanor, but I mean, it's a fun parallel, right? That Tolkien doesn't really spell out, but it's kind of a fun parallel how she resists Fëanor, but she follows in his footsteps, kind of like Fëanor resists Melkor, but does what he says and believes what he taught. So I'm kind of thinking in that same sort of way, right? On the one hand, she rejects Fëanor. On the other hand, that's her data, right? It's the only data that she has. Maybe she's resistant to it. Maybe she's willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. But of course, what the Green Elves are telling her would seem to confirm it, right? Like, here come the second. But again, she's not going to be merely, a confirmed xenophobe, right? When she goes into their camp, it's not like that. But yeah, not quite presumption of guilt, expectation of guilt, maybe, or not guilt. That's not quite the right word, but
she's going in with an open mind, but she's also going in assuming these people are doing something wrong and they need to stop doing it.
Right.
So she's going to listen to their viewpoint, but she's assuming that they don't have any defense for these activities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, so she's pretty much assuming the Green Elves have the right of it, and she just needs to convince these people of that.
Right.
So the whole conversation about capital punishment wasn't something she was expecting to have.
Right.
And that is a bit of a novel revelation for her, that there's actually a reason they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
And that impresses her enough to consider these people a little more deeply than she maybe had at first.
So maybe her perspective, maybe her approach is not condemnatory, right? It's not disdainful, but it could very well be condescending, right? Like, she could well believe that the most generous, positive, patient thing that she could do is come among these savages and teach them, right? Like, I've got to instruct these people clearly, right? Learners, come, my little mortal children, and let me explain to you some of the... We don't kill people and hang their bodies from trees. That's a no-no in Beleriand. Let me explain basic morality to you, because you obviously need lessons, right? And again, I'm exaggerating, but like, it could kind of feel like that, because it could kind of be like that. I mean, and again, my point is that would be actually a generous move on Galadriel's part. Like, she has lots of reasons to believe that she is in a superior moral position to them, right? Even just from the, thinking about it as objectively as she's had more opportunities than they've had, right? I mean, she used to live with Manwë and Varda, for crying out loud, right? So it's like good of her, right? Good of her to share what she's taught and to teach what she knows and to help these people. And obviously there's a desperate need for it, because, these people are soiling their environs wherever they go here, as the Green Elves are obviously complaining of. So I'm going to teach them to clean up their act and eat with forks and that kind of thing. And then, like, well, then we can move forward. Yeah. And then, as you say, she's surprised, right? She has this conversation in which she believes she's going to have to explain the rudiments of, like, a moral and ethical code, only to find that they have one, and that it's not, in fact, that alien to her. Like, they are much further along than she thinks they are, than she thought they would be. Does that kind of dynamic seem to work? You see what I'm trying to capture? I'm trying to capture the tone, the tenor of her attitude, her assumptions, and how this sort of conversation goes.
I think that's good. And there's two separate scenes there, where she first comes into the village and interacts with them initially, and then the second one with the meal and the conversation. Right. So there is room to have that initial reaction and then to show a different one. So I think we're good. I think that what you're saying works.
Okay, good. So by the time she goes to Thingol, she's gained some legitimate respect for them, right? Do we say that her perspective could be expressed by saying, or her change in perspective could be expressed by saying that she still has reservations, right? She still has concerns. She still is not going to understand. There's still going to be the elf-human gap thing going on with Galadriel and the humans. So it's not like she's now at one with the people, but she's at least, like, willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. She's saying, like, look, these people are not just, like, pointless, amoral savages banging rocks together, right? We should at least hear them out. It would be good to talk to them and get to know them better. They could make good neighbors.
And the whole teaching them thing, if they're not at the very, very basic level, then, there's things the elves could teach them.
But we can work with this. We can work with this. Yeah.
Right. Right. So she still thinks of them as a bit primitive, and she still has a superior attitude,
Right.
but she's gained at least some level of respect, and she has hopes for the future for this group of people.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So when she goes back, we talked about her encounters with Thingol. When she goes back from Thingol to them, what does she say and how does that go? Because on the one hand, she's like, okay, so I respect you and I'm going to treat you with some respect. So here's the thing. All the rest of the elves around here kind of hate you, and they still do, right? So don't go south or else they'll shoot you in the face. And don't go west, because that's not going to go well either. But other than that, everything's fine, right? I mean, like, it's how does that go?
I think she would word it a little differently. I think she would express that they are free to live their lives as they see fit within the plains of Estalot.
Right.
But they are forbidden from crossing the river into Osirian because that land belongs to the Green Elves, who will shoot you in the face. And they are forbidden from entering Doriath, where Thingol is lord. Like, she can put boundaries on their land and say that they are free to rule themselves within those boundaries.
How would she phrase it? Would she phrase it as like, I'm handing down some rules to you, just like, you know, I'm establishing some ground rules, and as long as you stay within the ground rules, you guys will be perfectly, you can do whatever you like? Or is she advising them like a friend? You know, is she coming and saying like, you know, I exhort you very strongly, don't go south, it won't go well. You can't go, you know, try it if you like, but it ain't gonna work to go west. Like, the, you know, those trees over there, don't even try it. I mean, do you see what I mean? Like, what's her attitude? I mean, I can't imagine her flipping totally around and being like, I'm on your side, guys, right? Like, that's not going to be her approach. But at the same time, we know she disagrees with Thingol. She thinks Thingol's wrong.
She's cast herself as spokesman in this episode. So she is the spokesman for the elves to the men. Like, I am here among you speaking for all the elves who live.
Right.
And therefore, she's going to convey Thingol's message as Thingol's message, not as her message.
Right.
And she'll convey the Green Elves' message as what they think. And she'll feel like she's done a good job because she articulated what these people think to the humans who weren't talking to those groups of people.
Right.
So she sees herself as a successful ambassador because she's conveyed the warnings appropriately and not let these people just walk into dangerous situations. Like, if they keep putting their pigs on the other side of the river, there's going to be more arrows in the future.
Yes.
But if they keep the pigs on this side of the river, the arrows will disappear.
Right.
So, you know, she feels like she's giving them a good warning.
Right. Okay. And how are they going to take it? Foreshadowing the council, Bereg. I imagine. Right. This is Bereg, right? Who's not going to be super happy. Who's going to be like, this sounds like reasons to leave, right? You know, so yeah.
Yes. Bereg is going to take this as elves are condescending jerks who hem us in a narrow place and don't let us live our lives.
And who are hostile when we've done nothing to them. I mean, like, they're not going to see driving their pigs through the land as harm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's going to say, you know what, we've had enough of Valerians. Let's get out of here. But that's 15 years later. So he does sit on this for some time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you think there would be kind of a mix, a range of reactions? Some of them would be more on that end of like, you know, well, this sucks. Let's get out of here. There'd probably be some hotheads that would want to rebel, but there's going to be some that are like, hey guys, we should be grateful for what we got. Could have been a lot worse. We could have been asked to leave.
Well, because again, Galadriel's impressive, right? I mean, like, they've got to know she's not coming in armor with a sword, but they've got to take. I mean, the intelligent Estaladians are going to look at her and say, "These people could mop the floor with us," right? Like, if she's telling us that it's fine, that we can be here, and all we have to do is just not go south of the river. Let's just say thank you, kind, impressive, slightly scary elvish lady, and live our lives here north of the river and be grateful for that.
Especially when the places that are being told not to go, as far as they know, are populated by more of these impressive people.
Yes.
They perhaps might think, well, we shouldn't be going over there anyway.
Right. Right. Exactly. They're gonna. I mean, yeah. It's hard to imagine many of the humans looking at I mean, just the differences between them are going to be pretty extreme, right? Looking at Galadriel and Celeborn and saying like, oh yeah, we want a piece of that. Like let's attack those people, like the nations which they represent, right? That's destined to end well, especially since these are not a militaristic people necessarily, right? I mean, they're not going to be. I'm not saying they're peaceful, but they're not. Or are they? I mean, are we imagining them being aggressive?
They're the ones who marched into Beleriand in companies, so they're more militant than the other two groups.
Right.
They have probably a bit of a proud warrior culture going on, but they're also very small.
Right.
Enclaves. Like
right.
Together, they'd add up to something. But this village is not going to take on Doria.
Right. Or even the anarcho-syndicalist commune. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Okay. But anyway, Dave, I do agree. It's not like we need to get a whole, battery of multiple reactions, but foreshadowing the council, essentially, like showing the different kinds of reactions to the elves, setting it up so that, the different positions, the different responses to the elves will be fully articulated in episode 7. But to sort of show, lay the groundwork for the variety of those reactions and what those will be, it seems like an obvious place to kind of take that step, especially since, Marie, we're not going straight there, right? We've got an episode in between, so we want to establish it so that when we come back to it, we already have a kind of a framework and don't have to build it up again. Who are these people and what is their relationship with the elves? We'll already have that sort of built in. So, yeah, no, that's good. Okay, I like that. It's getting late, and we haven't gotten.
And that's the B plot.
And that's the B plot. So we haven't gotten to the thing that I said at the beginning was going to be really hard to talk about, or really hard to decide on. So that's kind of an awkward thing to try to tail in at the very end.
Turns out you were right. It was really hard.
It was really hard to get to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we shouldn't try to rush through this. We'll do the C plot and we'll do the C plot next time. I had a foreboding which didn't quite rise to a foretelling, but a foreboding that we would not. Actually, I kind of did foretell it, Marie, didn't I? That we wouldn't get all the way through discussing episode 5 tonight. Not that that's a challenging or improbable prediction to make in this podcast. Okay. So if we'll talk about the Halladines trip through Nandangortheb. We will look more at the frame because we didn't get to the actual frame plot. And unfortunately, the frame plot, especially if we sort of restrict ourselves to these first 5 episodes, it's not. I mean, there's not much story. I mean, the story is brief because we get such small episodes of scenes of it. So I think we can talk about that as well next time, and still have time to talk about some elf and human things. But let me move forward to the things that I wanted to think about for next time. I do want to get to. We'll get to as much of this as we can next time. More topics related to the perspectives of elves and men. We've touched on some of this stuff before, but there are some more things, especially things that even just emerged out of today's discussion, that I would love to get back to in a more kind of general and theoretical way. The perspectives of elves versus men, on topics such as nature, change, faith and trust. And I don't mean faith theologically here. I mean like their attitude towards the world, basically, and their attitude towards other people, primarily. Though, of course, we can get theological there too, because there are theological implications of that as well, like their larger relationship to the world around them and their understanding of that world and its order and sense. Family and family ties, things like marriage and children and siblings and things like that. Death, I said death and taxes, but that's kind of a joke. Not actually tax, but law, basically. Death and law. And of course, again, so many of these things, right? Nature, change, faith and trust, death, law, all of these things came up in connection with stuff from this episode. And I would kind of like to go back and think through that a little bit. And again, you know, in the goal of these other sessions that we're kind of doing in between the episode discussions is to kind of do this sort of broader world building, think through these things, not because we're going to have these discussions come up in the episodes, but that we want to make sure that we're doing the thinking through so that when these things are raised and do come around directly or indirectly, we will have thought them through, and we'll have a sense of how to incorporate those into the stories. So, all right. So 2 weeks, a fortnight from now, on an auspicious day, we shall meet on Thursday, March 25th, a date which we should take note of, like Samwise takes note of it. At 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 10-ish p.m. Eastern Time, as always, is our next session. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been a fun discussion, as always. Thank you, Dave and Marie, and for everybody who is here live in various ways and in various methods. And we will see you guys later. I will say, as always, thanks for listening, and Godspeed.